Great. We are live. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Hello and welcome. Good evening. Thank you for joining us for the latest forum in our Issues That Matter series. Tonight, our topic is the silent aftermath, a discussion on tornado recovery efforts. This series is presented by the Central Arkansas Library System, the League of Women Voters of Pulaski County, and KUAR FM 89.1. I'm Daniel Breen with KUAR News, and I'll be guiding the discussion this evening. The Zoom forum is being recorded for a later broadcast on KUAR 89.1 with air dates to be announced. Before I introduce our panelists for this evening, I want to thank both the Central Arkansas Library System and the League of Women Voters of Pulaski County for partnering up with us on this event. I'd also like to give a brief explanation over the format for this online forum. We'll be asking our panelists a variety of questions, but we also want to hear from you, our viewers. If you have a question, please use the Q&A function in Zoom. You can also use the chat function if you must. We'd prefer you use Q&A. We're also monitoring our Facebook and YouTube streams, so if you're watching through those and leave a question there, we should see those as well. Well, all of our participants have received our topics and questions ahead of time so they can prepare, come with ideas, statistics, whatever they want to bring to the table. For each question that we ask, participants are free to answer them and comment on each other's input, and then we'll move on to the next question. But without further ado, thank you so much, all of our panelists, for joining us. Please help me welcome them to the forum. First up, we have Aaron Sadler. He's the Communications Director for the City of Little Rock. We have Sierra Calicott. She is the CEO of Unite to Fight Poverty. We also have Lillian Jacobs. She is the Creative Director of Unite to Fight Poverty. And last but certainly not least, we have Kendall Llewellyn. She is the Subject Area Manager for Housing at the Center for Arkansas Legal Services. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Well, I'm going to start in the order I introduced to you, but switch it up every time. So we're going to go Aaron, Sierra, Lillian, Kendall for the first couple of questions, but then the next question will start with Sierra, then go to Lillian, Kendall, then Aaron, so on and so forth. And it will be a great discussion. So I want to go ahead and start first off by asking you all just to introduce yourself a little bit. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what your connection to the topic we'll be discussing tonight is. And I will start with you, Aaron Sadler.
Sure. Thanks, Daniel. First, let me say thank you to CALS and KUAR, you, Daniel, and League of Women Voters for your great impact on the community, the way you guys have engaged with this topic and with so many others to help us, learn and grow as a community. Thank you for this opportunity to talk. Again, as you said, my name is Aaron Sadler. I'm the Communications Director for the city and the spokesman for Mayor Frank Scott Jr. Started in this role about 14 months ago. I call myself someone who took Charles Portis's escape velocity to heart. I've returned to Little Rock 4 different times in my adult life. Little Rock is my home. I'm proud that it's my home, and I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to take part in this conversation.
I am muted. Thank you so much, Aaron. Going next to Sierra Calicott.
Hi, I'm Sierra. I'm the CEO of Unite to Fight Poverty and an incoming 1L at the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville Law School. I founded Unite to Fight Poverty in my hometown of Little Rock about 2 years ago, and essentially founded in kind of the peak of the pandemic. I just wanted to connect people with the resources they need, specifically low-income Arkansans, after experiencing financial insecurity and poverty myself growing up. And now we've expanded to where we work in 8 states, internationally in Kenya, working to provide people with the resources they need.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Sierra. And next to Lillian Jacobs.
Hi, I'm Lillian Jacobs. I am the Creative Director of Unite to Fight Poverty. Sierra onboarded me pretty early in the process, and it has been really fun doing the marketing and kind of creating this brand. I currently attend ULR and am getting my bachelor's in public relations and strategic communication. I love Little Rock. It is my home. I came back to Little Rock after living in New York. So this disaster has really been very hard to wrap my head around, and I'm really happy to be here talking about it. So thank you for having me.
Well, we certainly thank you for being here. And Kendall Llewellyn, you're up next.
My name is Kendall Llewellyn. I'm an attorney at the other CALS, the Center for Arkansas Legal Services. We're a nonprofit law firm that serves low-income Arkansans in civil or non-criminal cases. We have a service area of around 44 counties across the state, but our headquarters is in Little Rock. And my role there is to supervise our housing department, where we provide legal services to help people, access safe, affordable housing.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you all once again for joining us here today for our panel. We're going to kick things right off. Our first question tonight: where are we at in the tornado recovery process? What are each of you focusing on currently in your work, and how has that changed since the tornado on March 31st? And I will start with you, Aaron Sadler.
Sure. Thanks, Daniel. So I sort of in my own head, to keep it all straight, have divided the process sort of into three different levels. Again, this is just my own thinking, but I think it works. For the first week, especially with the city of Little Rock, we were in the emergency phase. That was, making sure that everybody was safe, making sure everybody that was unsheltered found shelter, tending to the immediate needs of residents that were impacted. Very quickly after the emergency phase, we started what I would think now is about really a long-term response phase, responding by debris pickup, responding by making sure that those that were temporarily sheltered are moving toward permanent shelter. I think we're near the end of sort of the city's response phase as it relates to these three silos that I've put them in, and we're transitioning sort of toward a long-term recovery phase. But to answer your question as to what we're working on right now, I can't stress enough the importance of making sure everyone in the impacted neighborhoods knows that on June 11th, which is a Sunday, that will be the last time our contractor DRC that's the deadline for you to put out your debris on the curbside. Make sure it's within 10 feet of the curb. It needs to be in the public right of way. Make sure debris is separated. Your trees and your yard waste need to be in separate piles than your construction waste. That's really what we're focusing on right now is debris cleanup. We did it first, like the hours after the tornado, minutes really. Our public works crews were cleaning up the streets. Now we're cleaning up the property that we can on the roadway and in the public right of way. I am not a mathematician. I went to school for journalism, but I'm told that we've picked up more than 360,000 cubic yards of waste. And so to translate that a little bit, that's a football field's worth of debris that's 360 feet high. So you can imagine it's been a challenge. Can't say enough good things about our public works crews and our contractors who have gone through these communities and continuing to. That June 11th date, that's the last day we need you to put the waste out. And then after June 11th, which is a Sunday, the contractor will make one last sweep. Another thing we're working on, as you're aware, Daniel, and others I hope are, is distributing our $510,000 we received in donations through Little Rock Cares. That's money that's going directly to affect and respond to tornado recovery here in Little Rock. About 40% of that money we're giving back to the nonprofits who really helped in the first stage. The other 60% will be divided through individual grants. And we're working right now, the city is to identify our third-party administrator to both develop the application for those individual grants and then distribute those. And we hope to have that happen all this summer.
All right. Well, thank you, Aaron. Sierra Calicott, you're up next.
I think that Lillian will touch more on this, but our role in this process was pretty immediate, and with our role in what we do as a nonprofit, which is connecting people with the resources they need. Lillian made an amazing resource toolkit, which we'll touch on more later. But another aspect of what we've been working on is really ensuring that there's an understanding that disasters often shine light on the inequities that are already existing within our city and our state. And that especially goes for Little Rock, which I'll touch more later on. But right now, what United to Fight Poverty is working on is advocating for supplemental income assistance for Little Rock residents to be able, specifically for low income Little Rock residents, to be able to support themselves and sort of bridge the gap between addressing the effects of the disaster in a way that is equitable.
All right. Thank you, Sierra. Lillian Jacobs, the question again, where are we at in the tornado recovery process, and what are you focusing on currently in your work, and how has that changed since the tornado?
So I have a marketing brain. So the way that I look at this is kind of the information that we're getting. In my eyes, I feel like a lot of people have already just kind of moved on if it didn't directly affect you. I know a lot of people have completely forgotten that it happened. I haven't, in the news, I haven't seen a lot that's going on. I know that the city just split up about $500,000, and I know that there's a lot of efforts going on internally with Unite to Fight Poverty. We are doing, I'm working on a comprehensive resource guide that is going to provide all the resources that can help victims of the tornado when it comes to mental health, legal aid, housing, food, all these different things. The guide will be used for other things as well. We want it to go to pretty much anyone who needs it. But really, right the day after the tornado, I woke up and I threw together an Instagram post that had as many resources as I could find, but it was really hard to find those resources. I think the thing that really should be a focus for a lot of us is marketing. Like, the information needs to be out there, and it's pretty hard to find right now.
All right. Thank you, Lillian. And Kendall Llewellyn.
Yes, I appreciate the distinction that Mr. Sadler mentioned a moment ago between the emergency phase and sort of the longer term recovery. I agree that I think we're moving into the longer term recovery phase right now. And the issues that we've seen at the Center for Arkansas Legal Services are pretty wide ranging. Most of them deal with housing. I would say that in the early days, immediately after the tornado, we saw a lot of landlord-tenant disputes and some issues related to personal property like vehicles. I believe that the tornadoes hit pretty shortly before rent was due for many Arkansans. And so the questions that we were seeing from people were things like, you know, my home is destroyed or unsafe for me to live in. Do I still have to pay rent for this month? What will happen to my lease for the remainder of this year? Things like that. And in that phase, we started to collaborate, as we have in the past, with partners like our sister organization, Legal Aid of Arkansas, which has a different service area than us, and the Arkansas Bar Association. And we set up a statewide hotline for people, anyone, you know, in the state can call in to 501-376-3423 to try to access free legal aid if they are a tornado survivor with a tornado related legal issue. And we're still seeing people steadily coming in with issues related to the tornadoes. At this point, I think we're seeing around 10 applicants or cases a week. But we're starting to see different sets of issues now that we're in the kind of recovery phase. And now the things that people are coming to us are more in line of like, they've applied for FEMA benefits and they've been denied. And now they need to appeal and they need somebody to help them with the FEMA appeal. Or they have maybe realized that they have some kind of title or home ownership issue related to their home that they have to rebuild or repair. And we expect to see issues in the coming months related to contractors and home repairs. So that's kind of what we see coming down the line.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Kendall. And this is a very good segue into our next question. What are some of the biggest challenges that you all have been hearing from tornado victims, both renters and homeowners alike? And for this question, we'll start with you, Sierra Calicott.
One of the biggest concerns or source of confusion that we've seen just in our Instagram DMs, Facebook messages, talking face to face with people, doesn't particularly have to do specifically with housing, but concerns DSNAP. And how, which closed on May 2nd, but DSNAP recipients, it's for current SNAP recipients, you know, it's in the specific areas of Cross County, Pulaski County, and Lone Oak. they're not eligible for disaster SNAP services. And so there was some confusion about what additional benefits or supplemental benefits they could receive since they aren't qualified for disaster SNAP. And so what we found was that they could request the supplemental benefits to raise their allotment to the maximum amount for the household each month. But there was confusion on the process, the metrics of approval for that request. And it left a lot of Arkansans really concerned and with a sense of exclusion is the main feeling that was felt from what I can glean from our conversations, because low-income Arkansans are people who need the most resources and who deserve the most resources. And in this instance, they almost felt a sense of exclusion. And so I think that's been one of the biggest challenges on our end that I've seen.
Okay, thank you very much. And you cut out a little bit, but just to be clear, disaster SNAP, DSNAP, just basically food stamps for people who may not have heard it called that before. Going next to Lillian Jacobs.
Touching on a little bit of what both Kendall and Sierra said, one of the most affected areas was those apartment complexes on Maryland and Napa Valley, the Calais apartments, the Lennox apartments. I had family members who lived in the Lennox apartments, and I mean, it's been almost 2 months, and they still don't know about their lease and things like that. A lot of the complexes were condemned, and tenants didn't know for weeks and weeks after, and that's a lot of the information that I've been getting and I've been dealing with. I have another woman that I was talking to the other day. Her insurance is not going to cover the fact that her house flooded because Entergy, when they came to clear all of the trees, left them in the coulee or the ditch in the back. And then because we had another huge storm just 2-3 days after the tornado, it flooded, and all of those houses now even have more damage. There's just, again, a lot of confusion on where to go and where to find these resources. And that is, again, just the biggest issue that I'm seeing is people have no idea what to do. They're losing their benefits because they're just kind of hopeless. They're giving up. It's just information is not being shared. Really is a lot of it.
All right, thank you very much. Going next to Kendall Llewellyn, again, the question, and you already touched a little bit on this in your previous answer, but what are some of the biggest challenges that you're hearing from tornado victims, both renters and homeowners?
I second all of the comments that we just heard from Lillian and Sierra, but I would also add that a lack of access to safe, affordable housing for tornado survivors is probably the biggest theme that I have seen personally. That could be because I'm a housing attorney, though. But I would say that state law has not been particularly helpful for tornado survivors that happen to rent, because if they, live in a home that is not habitable or safe for them to continue living in, the legal option that they generally have is going to be to move at their own expense, rather than, for the owner to be made to make repairs, which has, left a lot of people in a bad position. However, in the city of Little Rock, we do have city codes and a city code enforcement department that is helpful with those health and safety issues. And that is a little different from state law because those kinds of issues are between the property owner and the city rather than between the landlord and the tenant, if that makes sense.
Well, that's a very interesting aspect, and I think maybe our next panelist could shine some light into that. Aaron Sadler, you're up next.
Sure. I wanted to piggyback on that a little bit and the idea that certain buildings have been condemned. That's getting into a little bit of semantics there, but my understanding from our planning department is that there are a number of apartment buildings that have been considered to be unsafe, and in those instances, our planning department has gotten with the landlord, to the property owner rather, and said, "Tell us what you're doing to rebuild. Tell us how you can tell us what buildings you can access, and get a structural engineers report. At that time, we'll review it and we'll present to you an action plan to where folks can safely get back to their units. I think that's happened in a lot of instances. I think it's been slow to happen in other instances, just what I hear anecdotally. But our number one concern is the safety of all residents. And so until we have a structural engineer's report and a plan from the property owner about how they can safely get back to collect their belongings, if that's the case, then that's right. We won't allow anybody on the property, but that's to protect the safety of all our residents. And unfortunately, that is one of the complaints we're hearing or challenges, is that there is a slow process to be able to access apartment buildings. Communication, I would encourage folks, at least from the city perspective, if you're not following City Little Rock on Facebook and Twitter, and if you're not following Mayor Scott on Facebook and Twitter, please do so. We try to put as much as we can, as soon as we can, out on social media. The mayor is holding bi-weekly news conferences to try to update folks on what we're doing. I can't speak for the state or for the federal government, but I can speak for us and what we're trying to do here in the city of Little Rock. And also, please keep in mind that the federal government through FEMA has opened a disaster recovery center at West Central Community Center, which is 8616 Colonel Glenn Road. That recovery center is open daily except for Sunday. And there folks can get one-on-one assistance with some of these questions they're asking. There are federal, state, and city officials there at the building and have been since they opened that center less than a week after the tornado. So if anyone is having issues and need direct help, I would just encourage them to go to West Central, because they can talk to a live person right there in Little Rock who can try to help them navigate through some of the issues that they're having.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your answers, everyone. If you all are just tuning in, you're watching Issues That Matter, the Silent Aftermath, a discussion on tornado recovery efforts. This series is presented by the Central Arkansas Library System, the League of Women Voters of Pulaski County, and KUAR FM 89.1. This virtual forum is being recorded for broadcast. It'll air at a later date here on KUAR. Our guests are Aaron Sadler, who you just heard from. He's the communications director for the city of Little Rock. We also have Sierra Calicott, CEO of Unite to Fight Poverty, Lillian Jacobs, creative director of Unite to Fight Poverty, and Kendall Llewellyn. She is the subject area manager for housing at the Center for Arkansas Legal Services. Well, we're moving right along in our discussion tonight, moving to our third question this evening. How has the state and the city and the federal response to the tornado here in Central Arkansas, how has that gone in your opinion, and how well has the process to receive aid gone in your opinion? And we will start with you, Lillian Jacobs.
Community-wise, I feel like right after the event, we were really strong, and it was really great to see everyone being so caring. But I feel like, now this is not my area of expertise, but I feel like a lot more can be done for the residences and the small businesses. I know that a lot of money was just distributed, and I just heard that North Little Rock just gave all their city employees a 2% raise after working for so long. But I think that we need to focus a lot of our resources to those residents. I mean, I know there's a campaign that I just saw about Move to Little Rock, and they're offering people $10,000 to come and move into Little Rock. And I feel like we've got people in Little Rock who could use that, that are here and are working. Again, not my area of expertise, but I just feel like some of the worst cases in our state, some people who have lost, quite literally everything, are receiving the least amount of information and aid.
All right. Thank you, Lillian. Kendall Llewellyn, you're up next.
I've generally found the government response to the disaster to be helpful, and I can't really speak to how it compares to their response to other disasters. I know early on, we were at the disaster recovery centers, some of them with many city, state, and federal agencies. And at least at that point in time, there was a lot of good access to information and resources for people who were affected by the tornadoes. I would say that the disaster recovery is happening at the same time that many Arkansans are losing access to health insurance through what we call the Medicaid unwinding. Many people have not maintained contact with the Arkansas Department of Human Services. And because of that, they will perhaps be losing access to their health insurance. And I think that would be, the timing of that is probably unfortunate for some of the tornado survivors.
Yes, absolutely. And moving on to Aaron Sadler, again, the question, how is the interagency response, the state, the city, the federal response to the tornado? How has that gone, and how has the process to receive aid gone, in your opinion?
Well, I think it's gone well. I do think that city, county, state, and federal government have worked together cooperatively. We communicated in the minutes after the tornado. The mayor and I and some others went out to the staging area for the Little Rock Police Department as soon as the tornado hit, and it was clear to drive from City Hall out there. And it was probably 30 minutes after it hit, our police were assembling at the staging area, which was the Emmanuel Baptist City Center, which turned into our Family Assistance Center. And I just recall standing out in the parking lot, and again, maybe 30 minutes after it happened, the mayor was on the phone with the governor, talking about whether or not to call out the National Guard in response. Obviously, the response has slowed and it has changed. We've talked about that. But I do think the fact that the federal government is still here, FEMA is still here, the Small Business Administration is still here. We're working to hear back from the USDA about grants related to the tree canopy and replacing some of the trees that were part of the fabric of these communities. We're also working with the Department of Housing and Urban Development, trying to find any grants or any assistance we could get for those that were displaced. I think all levels of government are working together to try to rebound and rebuild better.
All right, thank you very much. And Sierra Calicott, you're up next.
Yeah, bouncing off what Aaron said, I do think that the interagency efforts have truly been unique and distinct and individual in this circumstance. Like, I have really seen the work of FEMA, like you mentioned, and other state and local organizations working together, including even nonprofits. And so I think that, especially in the immediate response, there was a immediate, very quick response. I was out of the state when the tornado occurred, and I saw something the next morning about, groups getting together and responses being formulated. I think that the disconnect specifically with low-income Arkansans is not that the services and the resources aren't being provided. They are, and they are there, and they're spectacular. A lot of the times it's connecting the people with the resources. And it comes back to a lot of the structural issues that are associated with, poverty, and then also living in rural areas. I wouldn't describe Little Rock as necessarily a rural area, but we are in a rural state predominantly. And often in these areas, there is, a lack of transportation or just a general lack of access to resources. So specific examples I can think of from survivors and victims we've heard from are knowing about where these resources or recovery centers are, but being unable to get there, and just having a bunch of extenuating circumstances kind of getting in the way of that. And that's just something that we've seen throughout, in disaster times and just in regular everyday life, addressing the societal inequities we see. And so I think that as a community continuing forward in the recovery process, we have to continue to work to bring the people to the resources as well.
All right. Thank you very much, Sierra. Moving on to our next question tonight. As we continue the rebuilding process, what can we do to ensure equitable redevelopment and to avoid gentrification? And we will start with Kendall Llewellyn.
I would say that anything that we can do to support people rebuilding their homes and being able to remain in the neighborhoods they were in before is good. Maintaining stability so that, you know, those properties remain with those families rather than going into the hands of investors or developers who might, you know, change the fabric of those neighborhoods. I do genuinely hope that all of the properties that were damaged are redeveloped, but I especially hope that the multifamily properties are, because access to multifamily housing is a major thing that can, you know, prevent gentrification, because it allows renters to live in higher opportunity areas where they otherwise, you know, would not be able to own or rent a single family home. But I don't have any like specific policies that come to mind for preventing gentrification as a result of the tornado. There are certainly things that other governments have done with zoning to prevent gentrification, but I'll be very curious to see how this, you know, how the redevelopment happens. But I don't think that the neighborhoods that were affected are at a huge risk of gentrification. I think that, you know, they certainly could be, but I think that things would look very different if a tornado was to destroy a downtown area versus some of the other areas that were affected in central Arkansas, at least.
All right. Thank you very much. Moving on, Aaron Sadler, you're up next.
Yeah, here in Little Rock, I know the mayor and others here on city staff want to make sure that the residents that were displaced get back where they want to be, get back to where they were living, the lives that they were living before this horrible disaster. One of the things we're doing to help facilitate that, of course, is, and I think you all have heard this, but we waived permit fees. You still need a building permit or electrical permit when you're doing construction in the tornado zone. But if those fees that normally come with those have been waived, that's $150,000 worth of fees that we waived already. Another thing that we're doing is if you're building back on the original floor plan, the original footprint of your building, there's zoning requirements, any additional or new zoning requirements, they're going to be waived. We're not going to hold you to any kind of new or change zoning requirements since your home was built. Those are kind of things I think that will encourage folks to consider rebuilding. I know that, you know, Mayor Scott and our Department of Housing and Neighborhood Programs really have a keen interest in making sure Little Rock is affordable. And we have the whole affordable housing that we need. And I know we're going to look into, you know, what you were talking about, Kendall, is making sure that we have adequate multifamily housing development. Not sure what that's going to look like yet. Like I said earlier, we're in response and we're moving toward recovery. We're not there quite yet, but I know we're going to try to do everything we can to help our residents get back to where they were.
All right. Thank you, Aaron. Moving to you, Sierra Calicott. Again, the question, as we continue the rebuilding process, what can we do to ensure equitable redevelopment and avoid gentrification?
I think discussions of equity and then also potential gentrification in neighborhoods sort of exist within and then also outside of the confines of disaster relief and recovery. And considering United Fight Poverty is more of an advocacy-based organization, and we don't provide any direct services the way that Aaron and Ken do. But what I can speak on is the socioeconomic divide, specifically of Little Rock, and how I think that it's an interest. I've grown up here my whole life, like most of us on this panel, and I think that it's really interesting because I grew up under the poverty line about a block away from people that existed in the 1%. So the physical closeness of the very different lives that Little Rock residents live, I think also just is a strange existence, and then also can, amongst other factors, provide an environment in which gentrification can exist. And so I think, like with most elements of disaster response, we have to examine efforts to avoid gentrification through the lens of acknowledging the structural violence that's occurred that got us to this point. And then once we're able to acknowledge that and move forward with that in mind, I think that we can redevelop in an equitable way.
All right. Thank you so much, Sierra. And last but not least, Lillian Jacobs.
So, like Sierra said, Unite to Fight Poverty doesn't provide direct services. So me being a creative director, I'm really kind of more of a civilian answering this question. But I see, Sierra said there's a really close line of division, and those apartments on Napa Valley in Maryland and that neighborhood in Shackelford are just blocks away from a gated community that has a gigantic golf course, and Shackelford backs right up to a shopping center that's developing. And I know Little Rock is really attempting to develop, and it's great. And I love that. Petaway Square is a really great addition, but those areas that were essentially flattened are potentially prime real estate for gentrification. And I think if we continue to find, create, and spread information and resources for those affected, they'll be less likely to be blindsided if something like that were to come in. We have a really great opportunity to shine a light on how unbalanced resources are. The Heights and Kamak Village were also really devastated. And I have a friend whose house, big hole in their roof, it's already fixed, they're fine. They have those resources to be able to get that, but there are people who don't. And there is a big fear about what's going to happen to the low income apartments that are right next to the gated community. Which one is going to kind of be able to rebuild? So.
All right. Thank you so much, Lillian. If you all are just tuning in, once again, you're watching Issues That Matter, the Silent Aftermath, a discussion on tornado recovery efforts. This series is presented by the Central Arkansas Library System, the League of Women Voters of Pulaski County, and KUAR FM 89.1. I'm Daniel Brain with KUAR News, and this virtual forum is being recorded for broadcast. We'll be airing it at a later date on KUAR. And just a reminder, as we near the end of our program tonight, please put any questions you have for our panelists in the chat function here on Zoom. We'll have some time for those at the end of our program tonight. Well, moving right along, our next question: what does a full recovery from the March 31st tornado look like for you? And in your estimation, how long do you think that will take? And we will start with Aaron Sadler.
Well, I think everyone has a different thought about what full recovery looks like. I know I do. A couple of days after the tornado, I heard an insurance agent say that this was the costliest property damage in the history of the state of Arkansas. I think folks that don't live in Little Rock and in the areas that were hit by this high-end F3 really, unless you see it, you don't really take in the fact that there was so much damage. There was so much destroyed. There were so many trees that are gone. If you're going up 430 and you see a neighborhood that you didn't know was there because the trees had covered it, it's impressive and just devastating at the same time. And so to answer your question, sorry, I'm so glad that there was not a loss of life. But again, I think the fact that there wasn't a loss of life really, for a lot of people, makes people think that this isn't a big deal, when truly it's a huge deal when it comes to loss of property, potential loss of income for so many businesses. We initially estimated there were probably 2,900 structures in the tornado path that had some sort of damage. And now as we draw a finer point into it from some of our data, we know that almost 700 had major damage, almost 200 were completely destroyed. So a full recovery to me means all those displaced residents back and living in the community they want to live in. It means trees that are growing again, that tree canopy being regrown, our infrastructure rebuilt. We have 3 parks that were heavily damaged. Reservoir Park, we turned into a debris removal site. It's going to be several years before we even can consider what Reservoir Park might look like. So to me, a full recovery is going to take a long time. But I do know, just from the folks here in this panel discussion, from the folks I work with who have given almost 1 million hours, city employees have given almost 1 million hours to tornado relief. Our volunteers have provided $7 million worth of equivalent service. Just some amazing resiliency and strength and commitment to rebuilding. No matter how long it takes, I'm glad to be a part of a crew that wants to take that long to make sure that everybody is back and living where they want to live.
All right. Thank you, Aaron. Moving on to Sierra Calicott. You're up next.
I think for me, full recovery goes past just getting people back to the way that they were or where they were, but maybe getting them to a better place than before. I think disasters, like the most current disaster besides this tornado that comes to my mind, is obviously COVID pandemic. I think sometimes disasters often light to the importance of public service programs and the importance of community and the importance of things that we often find ourselves taking for granted. And an example for me would be the early child tax credit. That was something that was helpful during COVID. And then we saw those, hopefully, iterations of them continue on after. And so I think that the importance of public service programs, not just within government systems, but also being provided by organizations like CALS, doing great work with the community and providing not just food security or job opportunities, but also opportunities for people to be artistically valued and enriched and culturally connected. I think that those are really important. And it always shocks me that CALS doesn't have more funding, or programs like that aren't more revered and more taken, not taken for granted. So to me, a full recovery is going to take a while, because I'm hoping that Little Rock and Wynn and other areas affected by this disaster are left better than they were before by the time that we're done with them.
All right. Thank you so much. Moving on, Lillian Jacobs, the question again, what does a full recovery from the tornado look like for you, and how long do you expect that to take?
You know, I don't really know. I don't know if a full recovery is even what we should be looking for. Like Aaron was saying, it's going to take a really long time. You know, he brought up those trees. It is so odd driving through Little Rock and seeing neighborhoods that I didn't know existed, and then just seeing it being dark and being able to see everything. Like I'm gonna miss the trees for real. But I think Sierra said we want to be in a better place than before. I agree with her a lot about the public service programs. Having a task force or a collective of social workers and lawyers that are really like out and available, helping people with insurance claims and SNAP paperwork. And I know that there are things like that, like Kendall was saying, that's a lot of what they do. But I think, again, marketing brain, we don't know about these things. They're very, very, very rarely pushed forward. You hear about them when you maybe go to CALS, but not everyone goes to the library. Like, it's so underrated and underappreciated. Sierra and I just last week held a resource fair with Home for Healing, and we had CALS Be Mighty and AR Connects Now and all these different great organizations. And the people who came in had no clue about any of these resources that were offered. And I mean, CALS feeds people constantly. I mean, you can get so many resources that people just don't know about. That's one of the things that we're working for with this resource guide. But I don't think we necessarily, and I don't mean to sound off by saying this, but I don't think full recovery is really what we're should be shooting for. I think it's like full, that's not how I want to say that. Full information. I think we need to know our information, and I think we need to be in a better place than before. I personally want to see more organizations popping up out of this, and collectives and task forces and things like that really show up for the people and for each other.
All right. Thank you so much, Lillian. And Kendall Llewellyn.
To me, we would have a full recovery when everyone affected by the tornado has been made whole financially or otherwise. And unfortunately, I'm not sure that will happen, but I do think that we can make substantial progress towards that. I would like to see all of the homes and structures that were destroyed or damaged. I would like to see those rebuilt one day. I would like to see people back in their homes. I would like to see, survivors of the tornado rehoused in stable, long-term housing. And for all of those things, I'm not an expert on, construction and all of the parts involved in that, but I would guess that will take a year or longer. Other panelists have talked about the trees. I think that our neighborhoods are going to look very different for decades at least, because physically, so many things have just been flattened, and I think that part will take a very long time.
All right. Thank you very much, Kendall. Our last pre-written question tonight, and we will have, again, some time at the end for audience, listener, viewer questions. How have we changed as a city, Little Rock, following the tornado, and what lessons have we learned? And I'm going to start with you, Sierra Calicott.
I've heard a lot in mayoral campaigns and addresses to the city and protests, the concept of trying to unite Little Rock as one city. And for anyone who has lived here, that it often feels like a bunch of different little cities existing together. And I think in the immediate aftermath, like we discussed earlier, there was such a cohesive response and an outcry. But there was that feeling of being one city, at least for that, that initial week when everything happened. I'm not sure if we've fully gone back to being separate again, kind of in the transitionary stages. But I think that the one positive out of this horrifying disaster that has immeasurably changed our city is that I have seen more community, and other people have as well, out of Little Rock residents. And so that would be a positive change that I've seen from our city. But I also think that the inequities that we've been talking about this entire panel that have been put in sharp relief by this disaster, it's something that once you see, it's hard to move on and be like, I can't ignore that now. It's difficult. I think for some people, it's changed their perception of the realities of different circumstances for different people living in Little Rock. And so I think that our city has been positively changed, negatively changed, and just immeasurably moved. And so I think that this is one of those stages where we don't know what's going to happen next. It could either get a lot better, it could get a lot worse. But I have faith and I have hope in Little Rock, and I have faith and hope in all of the amazing people that are working towards this cause. And so I hope that we continue to unite as one city and look out for each other.
All right. Thank you, Sierra. Lillian Jacobs, you're up next.
This question was hard for me to answer when I was preparing earlier. I feel like I don't have a lot to say on this. I feel like we have become much more united. I do think of Little Rock as a bunch of little cities. Like, I don't venture into West Little Rock a lot, so I'm very guilty of forgetting a lot of the damage that happened. And I had to drive out to West Little Rock the other day, and it was just like, this is still happening. Like, people are still, you can still look into people's homes and see their closets. It's May 25th, and you can still drive there and see people's closets are full, and they haven't been back to touch them. I think, though, Sierra was talking about unity, and as we in Unite to Fight Poverty are doing this massive resource guide, the resources that have, like I've been saying this whole time, marketing and information being shared, resources have jumped way more in my face, and I am enjoying how many more resources I'm seeing. I'm going to coffee shops and seeing pamphlets for things like Be Mighty or Arkansas Legal Aid. I think the lessons that we've learned are that we do have resources, and those are resources that we all need to be paying attention to and supporting and spreading around and kind of being a part of. I love Little Rock. It is like my heart and soul. I really adore the city, and I just want it to be a big, beautiful, thriving city. And I think those resources, sharing those resources, uplifting those resources in those communities more conversations like this being, pushed to the forefront of our conversations are really what's important.
All right. Thank you, Lillian. Moving on, Kendall Llewellyn, again, the question, how have we changed as a city following the tornado, and what lessons have we learned?
I appreciate Sierra's response to this question. I think that this experience has really unified Little Rock as a city, no matter what neighborhood you're from, whether you are personally affected or not, no matter which side of the interstate you happen to live on. We all experienced this terrible thing together. And I think that it has given us a lot of empathy for our neighbors. And with that, I would say that something it has taught us, what it has taught many of us, is that many of our laws are not helpful to those in poverty. Specifically, earlier I talked about how our state landlord-tenant laws are not terribly helpful for those who are facing health and safety issues in their homes, in their rented homes. And that was the case before the tornado. It's the case after the tornado. I think what it has taught people, though, I think that people are incredibly sympathetic to survivors of the tornadoes. And so, to see someone in that situation through absolutely no fault of their own as a result of a natural disaster, I think showcases a problem that was always there before.
All right. Thank you, Kendall. And Aaron Sadler, you're up next.
Well, it's hard to be the last person to answer this question. I just want to echo what everybody else said, but I'd like to position it differently. I don't know that we've changed. I think we just, our humanity displayed itself and has. I think people are inherently good, or at least I hope that they are. And I think we saw that in the tornado. We saw, when we're accepting donations, we didn't ask, did you vote for Frank Scott Jr.? We didn't ask, or what side of the river are you from? We didn't ask what church you go to. We didn't ask your sexual orientation or your race. We become our humans, our best selves during times of crises. And if anything needs to change, then I think we need to stop just becoming our best self when somebody else needs our help and try to be our best selves all the time. On a more granular level, obviously, when it comes to emergency response, there are always things we learn and we do better. And God forbid, there's another tornado. But I think as a city and as city response teams, we learned from this. We found things that worked and some things that didn't. When we talk about communications specifically, the sort of the old way of doing things was to have people come to a place. And now it may be to encourage people to file for disaster relief online if they have that capability, if they have a smartphone, doing more things with technology to get the word out, talking about, internally text messaging services that help push notifications out to the public. Those are the kind of things that we're going to look at and examine as a city as we strive to get better as well. But I do really believe that crisis doesn't change anybody. It just brings out what's in us all along. It brings out our best. And I think we saw that March 31st and moving forward.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Aaron. Once again, if you all have any questions, our viewers tonight, please put them in the chat. We are nearing the end of our program, but we have a little bit of time left for some audience questions. The first, and anyone can answer as much or as little. There's no order or anything like that. Everyone feel free to jump in where you see fit. Our first audience question: in the aftermath of a tornado, what are the key psychological, emotional, and social impacts experienced by individuals? Don't everyone answer at once.
I am not a psychologist. I don't do any of that for a living. But I will tell you, by the grace of God, I wasn't affected. We live in Petaway, and so City Hall is in downtown. So I wasn't personally affected by the tornado, but the toll of seeing everything, going back out into the community over and over again that first week, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday of that week, I finally took a breath and I just broke down. And I wrote something on Facebook because I just had to express it, of how resilient our community is. To me personally, the psychological toll is the recognition that people are hurting and I'm not doing enough to help ease the pain. And that's tough. I think that's especially tough for our first responders, the folks who are out there immediately going door to door and checking for people in this horrendous war zone. Fortunately, the city, we have a wellness unit in our police department and fire departments. Our top priority is the mental health and well-being of our first responders. I don't know that necessarily asks the question, but I can just tell you on a personal level, it took a toll on me, and I think it has taken a toll on everybody that's been working closely. All of us on this call working closely with tornado survivors, and it's just something that's going to take a while to process and get through.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been in no way trying to insert myself into this, but I second everything you said, Aaron. This tornado, thankfully, came very close to the neighborhood I grew up in, hit my parents' home. Somewhat bad, of course. They're very lucky. Everyone was okay, not as bad as other neighborhoods, but it is. I have to agree. Experiencing that and also reporting on it, it's been a very fatiguing process, but it has been really heartening to see the response from everyone here in Central Arkansas.
As a former journalist, I can tell you journalists don't get the credit that they deserve and should deserve for the efforts they make in covering disasters and traumatic events in the community. I know where you're coming from. This is tough for you. You were out there that the day after when there was a man right there in Walnut Valley, debris piled high in his living room, which was his front yard for all intents and purposes that day. And all of us out there in our suits, and you with your microphone, and us with our with our cameras, and all the guy wanted was someone to help him move this 6 foot tall pile of debris so that he could get to his photo albums. And we couldn't help him because we were dressed nicely and we didn't have gloves. And that's the sort of thing that haunts me. What could I have done more? And I know that, back to what you said, and don't minimize your role. Journalists played and continue to play an important role in the community, and you guys did a heck of a job too.
Oh, certainly, thank you for that. I appreciate that, and it can be hard to report on, but it can also be hard to hear and to view and to listen to, just as Central Arkansas residents. So we just want to stress, this is tough for everyone. So make sure you're taking care when consuming the news and helping out. Well, we have time for one more question from the audience. I think, Aaron, this is probably a bit of a question for you, but certainly anyone else can jump in. Noel Matthews says, I volunteer at a food pantry that is on the edge of the affected area. We received a grant to help purchase easily prepared food to help displaced families, but the money is gone by June 2nd. I think the need will be ongoing for several more months. Will organizations that the Little Rock Cares Emergency Relief Fund gave the donations to, will those organizations be willing to fund food pantries like this one? Where can I find more information about that?
I do know that we've already set out a plan for Little Rock Cares money. The other side of that coin, in addition to the money, the city had a donation center at our Emergency Operations Center on Murray Street, where we collected almost 500 pallets worth of goods, food, water, non-perishable items. We're in the process of trying to figure out where that goes. I know the Arkansas Food Bank, the Hunger Relief Alliance, Goodwill are all partners, and Emmanuel Baptist Church and their food pantry. They're all our partners in trying to get those in the right places. I would say just, give us time to sort of figure out how to work out all that and the bureaucracy of all that, for lack of a better word. I would encourage you, feel free to email me. My email is asadler, that's ASADLER @littlerock.gov. I can get you to the right person in the city to where we can talk about what your needs may be and where we can help.
And there was one more audience question, kind of similar, along similar lines. Candy Roman asks, do you have any information on grants for individuals that lost their homes? The city of Little Rock has that. Again, that $300,000 that'll be going directly to the affected individuals. She asks, how will that be spent? But I would go a step further and just Aaron, if you have any more updates on that front of the rollout of that.
Sure. And of course, I know there are countless nonprofit agencies. There's state and federal grants that are available. I'm not aware of all those opportunities. So I would encourage you, if there's anybody else on the panel that could help answer that question about other opportunities. For instance, I think it was the Realtors Association that was offering grants at one point. There have been so many people that have poured out their hearts and wallets to tornado survivors. But to answer the question about the city's Little Rock Cares Fund, what our process is, and just this week we solicited a request for proposals from third-party administrators who will develop an application and an awards process for individuals who are tornado survivors for direct grants. That RFP is open for 2 weeks. So hopefully mid-June, we'll be able to identify that third-party administrator, award them the contract, and we hope that they expedite and get the ball rolling on distributing these grants. And of course, as soon as we have more information about where residents need to go to apply, what the criteria are going to be, we will make sure that everybody knows that. Again, I encourage you to follow the city on Facebook and Twitter.
All right. Well, thank you, Aaron. And thank you all so much for taking the time to answer our listeners' questions here tonight. That concludes tonight's forum. I want to thank again all of our participants for coming out tonight and sharing their thoughts and ideas. This has been the latest panel in our Issues That Matter series. Please share comments on this forum and ideas for future forums by emailing comments@ualrpublicradio.org or through the social media accounts of the Central Arkansas Library System, the League of Women Voters of Pulaski County, or KUAR FM 89.1. Again, this panel will air at a later date on our airwaves here at KUAR. Just want to say on behalf of the Central Arkansas Library System, the League of Women Voters of Pulaski County, and KUAR 89.1, thank you all so much for attending. Thank you all for participating. I hope you have a great night and take care. Thank you all so much.